15 years of marriage, and I had never really questioned who I truly was. Michael Bennett, 42, a respected maritime engineer, a devoted husband, or at least that's how everyone saw me. But inside, something had always been asleep, waiting to wake up. The mirror showed a man with a rigid posture, gray hair at the temples, and eyes that carried questions never asked. Subscribe to the channel and give your like to get access to more stories like this. I hit the road on a July morning, alone in my silver sedan. My wife Carol kissed my forehead and said that some time apart would do us good. "Go visit your cousins. Clear your head," she suggested. But we both knew there was more behind that trip. Our intimate life had turned into a desert, and I had stopped asking why. I drove for hours listening to Johnny Cash, mentally mapping out every mile as I did with maritime platform projects. Calculated, precise, predictable. That was Michael Bennett. Until the unexpected happened. The American summer heat melted the asphalt as I cruised down that Midwestern back road. Golden fields stretched to the horizon. The blue sky looked like an endless canvas, and the silence was broken only by the engine of my car and my own wandering thoughts. I pulled into a lonely gas station to refuel. The attendant, a weathered man with calloused hands, mentioned that the next few days were expected to be muggy. "It's no good being without air conditioning around here, buddy," he warned, as I paid for the gas and a chilled bottle of water. The solitude of the road embraced me like an old friend. For the first time in years, I didn't have to answer questions, justify my decisions, or fake interest in corporate small talk. I parked on the shoulder to admire the sunset, a display of colors that my routine had made me forget. In that moment, I felt something different, a freedom I hadn't experienced in a long time, as if the invisible chains that held me down were finally beginning to loosen. The crack came as suddenly as it was alarming. A stone ricocheted on the road and hit my windshield with the precision of a bullet. The crack raced across the glass like frozen lightning, turning it into a translucent mosaic that was impossible to ignore. "Shit!" I exclaimed, slowing down as I tried to see the road. My cell phone had no signal in that remote area. The sun was beginning to set, and visibility dropped with every minute. I spotted a lonely house on a small hill about 200 meters from the road. My only option. I parked on the shoulder and walked along the dirt road. A man was chopping wood in the front yard, his swings precise and strong. When I got closer, he paused and looked up. Dark hair intermingled with gray, a stubble beard, eyes of an intense blue that contrasted with his sun-bronzed skin. "I had a problem with my windshield," I explained, pointing to the car. "Could I use your phone to call a tow truck?" He rested the axe against the log and wiped the sweat from his forehead with his forearm. "Connor Mackenzie," he introduced himself, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, his hand calloused from hard work. "Michael Bennett," I replied, feeling a strange electricity in that brief contact. "I have a landline, but I doubt they can get out here before tomorrow," he said, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "You're lucky I'm here. I usually go weeks without seeing anyone." Connor's house surprised me. On the outside, it looked like a rustic cabin, but the interior revealed the touch of an architect. Open spaces, plenty of natural light, simple but elegantly designed furniture. "I designed and built this place myself," he explained, noticing my appreciative gaze. "In my previous life, I used to design skyscrapers in Chicago." The tow truck service confirmed what Connor had predicted. They wouldn't come until the next morning. Resigned to my situation, I accepted his offer of hospitality. "If you don't mind helping out, I'm making dinner," he suggested, guiding me to a garden at the back of the property. We picked tomatoes, basil, and lettuce. His hands worked with such finesse that you could tell he was one with the earth. I watched the way he moved, how he bent over the plants, how he smiled while explaining each variety. There was something magnetic about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. In the kitchen, Connor taught me how to whip up a sauce using the freshly picked tomatoes while the chicken roasted. The aroma filled the space, and for the first time that day, I realized I was genuinely relaxed. After dinner, we sat on the wooden porch that wrapped around the house. Connor poured craft whiskey into 2 lowball glasses. Stars dotted the dark sky in a way that city light pollution had made impossible to see before. "I need to call my wife," I commented, feeling a twinge of guilt for how little I'd thought about her over the past few hours. Connor nodded, pointing to where the phone was. The conversation with Carol was brief and oddly formal. I told her about the accident, left out where I was staying, and promised to call back the next day. When I hung up, I felt a familiar emptiness. Back on the porch, Connor talked about constellations, pointing out patterns in the starry sky. I watched his profile cut against the night, the way his lips moved when he spoke, how his eyes mirrored the stars. A strange, unexpected warmth rose in my chest. Our fingers touched when he handed me the whiskey bottle again. The contact, though brief, sent an electric jolt down my spine. I quickly withdrew my hand, causing a few drops of the drink to spill. "Are you okay?" Connor asked, his penetrating gaze seeming to see right through my carefully constructed facade. "I'm tired," I lied, avoiding his eyes. "The trip, the accident." But the truth was different. Something was awakening inside me, something I'd spent my entire life trying to ignore, something that now, far away from all my familiar anchors, threatened to emerge with a force I hadn't felt before. The night air had cooled when we finally went inside. Connor led me down a narrow hallway to a simple yet cozy guest room. A single bed with a patchwork quilt, a solid wood dresser, and a window framing the starry sky. "The bathroom's at the end of the hall," he said. "Clean towels are in the closet. Make yourself at home." I thanked him and was left alone with my swirling thoughts. Through the thin wall, I could hear Connor moving along the hall, the sound of water running somewhere in the house. The quiet amplified every sound, every beat of my racing heart. I waited until everything was silent and grabbed my toiletries. The hall was dark, lit only by a faint light coming from some distant room. I found the bathroom, simple and clean, with white tiles and a spacious shower. The door had no lock, just a simple latch that didn't quite fit right. The hot water was a relief for my tense muscles. I closed my eyes, letting it cascade over my face, trying to wash away the confusion that had taken hold. Why did I feel so restless? Why did every moment with Connor seem loaded with a meaning I couldn't, or didn't want to, decipher? Then I realized the bathroom door was ajar. I hadn't shut it properly, or maybe the faulty latch had given way. Through the gap, I caught movement. Connor was standing in the hall, frozen like a statue, his gaze meeting mine through the steam that filled the room. I didn't cover up. I didn't look away. Something primal inside me recognized that moment for what it was, a point of no return. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching like warm honey. Connor slowly stepped forward and pushed the door open. The bathroom light revealed his bare torso, his sweatpants slipping low on his hips. His eyes never left mine, as if they were asking me something in a wordless language. "Michael." His voice was husky, almost a whisper. "Can I come in?" Those three simple words carried the weight of a lifetime of questions I'd told myself were unanswerable. My name on his lips sounded different, like he was really seeing me. Not the engineer, not the husband, but the man behind all those masks. "Yes," I answered, my voice unrecognizable even to myself. Connor closed the door behind him. The small bathroom seemed to shrink under his presence. We stayed like that for a moment, less than a meter apart in the heavy air of possibility. The water continued to fall, creating a curtain of sound as if to isolate us from the outside world. He stepped closer, moving into the shower's light even though he was still dressed. The water drenched his hoodie, clinging to his body. His hands found my face, thumbs tracing invisible lines over my cheekbones. The contrast between the hot water and the coolness of his touch sent shivers down my spine. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his warm breath against my lips. Instead of answering, I closed the gap between us. Our lips met with a contained urgency, as if we'd been holding our breath for decades and finally could exhale. His hands slid down my shoulders, over my back, exploring every inch with reverence. My own hands, shy at first, found the courage to pull his soaked shirt away. Connor's other clothes came off with a mix of desperation and care. Our wet bodies came together completely, skin on skin, with no barriers. The sensation was intoxicating, so different from everything I had ever experienced that it felt like a new way to exist. His hands were like maps uncovering secret territories of my body, places I hadn't even known could be sources of pleasure. Every touch, every kiss, Every shared breath built a language between us that was entirely new. I felt both vulnerable and strong, exposed yet safe. The water started to cool, forcing us to come out of the trance. Connor turned off the shower and grabbed 2 towels. We dried each other in silence, every movement a lingering caress, every glance a silent promise. "Come with me," he whispered, taking my hand and leading me out of the bathroom. His room was larger than the guest room, dominated by a wide bed covered in white sheets. A single bedside lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. Through the open window, the night air carried the scent of wet earth and the distant sound of crickets. Connor gently pulled me onto the bed, laying me down on the cool sheets. His body settled over mine, his weight anchoring me in the present moment, keeping my mind from wandering to future guilt or regrets. "Have you ever?" he began. "Never," I replied, surprising even myself with my raw honesty. His eyes softened. "I'm going to take care of you," he promised. And he did. With the patience of someone who has all the time in the world, Connor introduced me to pleasures I never knew were possible. His lips traced constellations on my skin, discovering sensitive spots that made me gasp and tremble. His hands guided me with both firmness and tenderness, taking me to dizzying heights of sensation. When we finally became one, the initial pain transformed into a fullness that went beyond the physical. We moved together as if we had spent a lifetime rehearsing this dance. Every advance was a revelation, every moan a confession, every drop of sweat a silent prayer. The pleasure built in rising waves, each one higher than the last, until I couldn't hold back any longer. When climax came, it was as if something fundamental inside me broke and was remade, transformed into something new and unknown. Connor's name escaped my lips like an incantation, and I felt his arms tighten around me as he too lost himself in that shared storm. We lay in silence, our bodies intertwined, breaths gradually returning to normal. Reality began to creep into the corners of my mind, yet strangely, it didn't bring the panic I expected. It brought a crystalline clarity, as if I'd emerged from murky waters into a perfectly still lake. "Are you okay?" Connor asked, his fingers lazily tracing circles on my back. "I'm more than okay," I answered, surprised at the truth in those words. It's as if I spent my whole life wearing glasses with the wrong prescription, and someone finally handed me the right ones. Connor smiled, that crooked smile I had already begun to memorize, one corner of his mouth always lifting a bit, with small wrinkles forming at the edges of his eyes. "When did you find out?" I asked, turning to look at him. "That I was gay? I always knew, in a way, but I fully accepted it in my 20s. His hand met mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. "And you?" I sighed, gathering thoughts I'd never allowed to take a solid shape. "I think there were always signs, moments, men I was attracted to, and I convinced myself it was just admiration. Fantasies I buried so deep I almost believed they'd never existed." "And Carol?" Connor asked gently, without any judgment. My wife's name hung between us like a tangible presence. Strangely, I didn't feel the crushing guilt I had expected. "I truly love Carol," I finally said. "But now I understand that maybe it was always a different kind of love than what should exist between husband and wife. She's my best friend, my companion. But this," I gestured to encompass us both. "This was never there between us. This intensity, this connection." Connor nodded, understanding. "I was married too, you know. To Lisa. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." The revelation surprised me. "But you said you always knew." "And I did. Lisa knew too. We had an open, honest relationship. We were best friends who chose to build a life together. She had her partners. I had mine. But at the end of the day, we always came back to each other." I fell silent, absorbing this possibility I'd never considered. The idea that love and desire didn't have to follow the conventional paths I'd been taught. "I'm not saying this is the path for you," Connor continued, reading my mind. "Every person, every relationship is unique. I'm just saying there are more possibilities than society leads us to believe." I looked up at the wooden ceiling, watching the play of light and shadow. For decades, I had lived within the limits of others' expectations, following a script that wasn't written by me. And now, on an ordinary road, a cracked windshield had led me to this revelation. "It's strange," I murmured. "I don't feel shame or guilt. I feel relief. Like I've been carrying a heavy weight without even knowing, and suddenly someone lifted it from my shoulders." Connor rested an elbow on the doorframe, his blue eyes studying my face intently. "Some people never experience this moment of truth, Michael. It's a gift, even if it's complicated." I reached out, touching his face, feeling the stubble against my fingers. This man, this stranger who was no longer a stranger, had awakened something dormant inside me. Not just physical desire, but a courage I never knew I had. The courage to finally face my own truth. "What happens tomorrow?" I asked, as the reality of the outside world began to intrude once more. "Tomorrow, the tow truck will bring a replacement car, as planned. You'll go visit your relatives, as planned." His fingers caressed my cheek. "What wasn't planned was this. You and me. And what happens with this? Well, that depends on you." I pulled him closer, our bodies fitting together like pieces in a puzzle. Tomorrow I would face consequences, decisions, ethical dilemmas. But tonight was about discovery, truth, and the scary freedom of finally allowing myself to be who I really was. The dawn came with an unrelenting brightness, sun rays piercing through the thin curtains and lighting up our intertwined bodies. I woke up first, watching Connor sleep beside me. The curve of his shoulders, the steady rhythm of his breathing, his tousled hair falling over his forehead. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine waking up like this every day. The tow truck would arrive in a few hours. Reality waited impatiently outside that secluded property, ready to claim me. I carefully slid out of bed, trying not to wake him, but Connor opened his eyes as soon as I moved. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. There was no awkwardness in his gaze, only a genuine warmth that soothed me. "Good morning," I replied, leaning in for a brief kiss that somehow felt both new and familiar at the same time. We shared a quiet breakfast on the back porch. Fresh eggs, homemade bread, strong coffee. The morning was perfect. Dew still sparkled on the grass, birds sang in the old oaks, and the air had that special quality found only in the early hours. "What are you thinking about?" Connor asked, breaking our comfortable silence. "About how this situation would have been a nightmare for the Michael of a couple days ago," I responded honestly. "And about how, strangely, it now feels like the most natural thing in the world." Connor smiled, that same crooked smile I had already stored in my memory. Truth has that effect. Once we recognize it, it's hard to imagine how we ever lived without it. Truths can destroy lives too," I observed, thinking about Carol, our years together, and promises made. "Or transform them," he countered gently. "Don't underestimate the people who love you, Michael. Sometimes they know us better than we know ourselves." The sound of a vehicle on the road interrupted our conversation. The tow truck slowly made its way up the dirt driveway and stopped next to my damaged car. Reality had arrived. The process was quick and impersonal. I signed forms, listened to instructions about the replacement car, exchanged insurance information. Connor watched from the porch, a still figure against the backdrop of the wooden house. When the tow truck driver finally left with my damaged sedan, we were alone again with silence filled with unspoken words. I went back inside to grab my bag. Connor followed me to the guest room, the room I'd barely used. "I have to continue my journey," I said, the obvious truth hanging between us. "I know," he replied, leaning against the doorway. I closed my bag and turned to face him. "Connor, I don't know how to process all of this yet. I need time." "Time is something I have plenty of here," he said with a small smile. "I've been alone for years. I can wait a little longer." "I'm not asking you to wait," I quickly clarified. "It wouldn't be fair." Connor stepped closer, taking my hands in his. "Michael, let me tell you something I learned when Lisa got sick. Life is unpredictable and cruel in its brevity. I spent years hiding before finding my truth. I don't want you to make the same mistake." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my heart racing. "Nothing beyond what's already happened," he replied. "Take your trip. Visit your relatives. Think. Feel. Decide. But take this with you." He touched my chest gently, right over my heart. "This truth you've discovered about yourself. Don't bury it again." His simple gesture moved me more than any grand declaration ever could. There was no pressure, no expectations, just the understanding that something significant had been born between us, something that deserved to be honored no matter what the outcome. We exchanged phone numbers. I jotted down his on a scrap of paper since Connor didn't have a cell phone. "The reception is awful out here anyway," he explained with a casual shrug. When it was time to leave, we carried my bag to the rental car. The day was clear, with a sky so blue it almost hurt. For a moment, I hesitated with the car door open, one foot already inside. "Can I come back?" I asked abruptly. "Before I head home, after visiting my cousins, could I stop by here again?" Connor's face lit up with an expression that mixed surprise with restrained hope. "My door will always be open," he replied simply. We shared one last kiss, not with the urgency of the previous night, but with a tenderness that sealed an unspoken promise. I got into the car and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw Connor standing in the same spot, watching me leave. I didn't wave, nor did he. Some silent understanding told us that this wasn't goodbye. I drove for almost an hour before stopping at a small roadside cafe. I ordered a coffee and sat on a bench outside, gazing at the distant mountains. I picked up my phone and hesitated for a moment before texting Carol. "We need to talk when I get back. It's nothing to worry about, but it's important. I love you." It was true. I loved Carol. Perhaps not in the way we both deserved, but with a genuine depth formed over years together. She deserved honesty, even if the truth brought pain. I finished my coffee and got back on the road. On the radio, a country song spoke of second chances and roads not taken. I smiled at the irony. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number read, "The house already feels empty without you. Drive safe. C." Something in my chest expanded, a feeling I recognized as hope. Whatever road lay ahead, at least now I was driving with my eyes wide open. 3 days passed as I attended to my family obligations. I smiled at lunches, answered questions about my work, listened to cousins' stories I barely recognized. On the outside, I was the same Michael as always. On the inside, an earthquake had rearranged my inner landscape. Every night, Connor and I exchanged messages. Nothing explicit, nothing compromising, just fragments of our days, random thoughts, little details I normally wouldn't share with anyone. It was as if we were building an invisible bridge between us, word by word. Carol also wrote regularly. In our messages, I began to notice a pattern I had never seen before. The way our communication was practical, affectionate but reserved, devoid of the electricity I felt every time I saw Connor's name on my phone screen. How had I not noticed it for so long? The night before I left, I sat on the porch of my cousin's house and finally allowed myself to think about the future. Not in any concrete plans. It was still too early for that, but in possibilities. An amicable divorce? A double life? A confession followed by an attempt to rebuild our marriage? Every path had its own thorns and promises. I decided not to decide just yet. First, I needed to go back to Connor's house. I needed to confirm that what I'd felt wasn't just a temporary delusion, a moment out of time. I needed to know if that connection would endure when we saw each other again. On the morning of my departure, my cousin Joyce hugged me unusually tight. "You seem different, Mike," she commented, frowning. "Lighter, somehow." I smiled, surprised by her perception. "I guess the road did me some good." "Whatever it is," she replied, "hold on to it. It's been a while since I saw that spark in your eyes." I drove without hurry, savoring the anticipation. The road that just days ago was merely a means to an end now felt like a character in my story. The one that led me to Connor, that led me to myself. When I finally saw the entrance to his property, my heart pounded like a teenager on a first date. I saw his silhouette on the porch before I even parked, as if he were waiting, as if he could feel my approach. I got out of the car and walked toward him. We met halfway, without rush, without the need for words. When we embraced, it felt like coming home. A home I never knew existed until I stumbled upon it on a back road. "How long are you staying?" he asked as we walked hand in hand toward the house. 2 days, I replied. Then I have to go back and face whatever comes. Connor nodded, understanding. 2 days is a good start. We stopped on the porch and gazed at the horizon. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, just like that first night. "You know what's funny?" I commented as we watched nature's daily show. "If that stone hadn't cracked my windshield, if I'd kept driving, I would have never discovered this part of me. I would have never met you." "I believe some encounters are inevitable," Connor replied, his arm wrapped around my waist. "If not now, it would have been at another time, in another way." Maybe he was right. Perhaps there are forces in the universe that push us exactly where we need to be, even when we resist. Or maybe it's just chance. Random stones on windshields, unlocked bathroom doors, strangers offering shelter. What I know for sure is that those 2 days with Connor turned into weeks of secret visits, which eventually became months of hard decisions and honest conversations. Carol cried, but not in the way I had expected. Part of her confessed she had always felt something was missing between us. Today, a year after that first night, I write these words from the same porch where we shared that whiskey. My life isn't perfect. There are still wounds healing, relationships being rebuilt on new foundations, moments of doubt. But it's authentic at last. It's mine. And it all started because a bathroom door was left unlocked. So, to you who are listening now, I leave you a question. What doors in your life remain closed simply because you never tried the handle? What truths are waiting to be acknowledged, patient and inevitable, like the sunrise? Subscribe to the channel and give your like to get access to more stories like this. If this story touched something within you, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Next week, I'll tell you how it was to tell my parents at 42 that I had found love in the arms of a man I met by chance on a back road. And believe me, their reaction is going to surprise you as much as it surprised me. Thanks for walking with me on this journey. Until next time.